Welcome to the Legacy Driven Marriages Podcast, episode 34. It's time to get into the marriage arena, time to have some fun like we always do, time to have this is going to be a real kind of conversation. Focus on strengthening your relationship with your spouse. I'm your host, Walt McKinley. And as always, I am here with my spouse, my partner in crime, my better half, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody.
Before we get started today, make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, and share these episodes out. We cannot reach people without your help and your commitment to also helping not only you create a better relationship, but helping others create a better relationships too. As we thought about this episode, it's funny because Steph and I were even talking about back and forth and prepping and how do we want to go through it. And we were almost arguing with each other.
So you're about to get in a fight starting this episode.
And look, have you guys ever fought with your spouse? Have you guys ever said or heard things from your spouse that really hurt you? Ever felt like when you're arguing, one of you are trying to win the argument? Our pastor said not too long ago, he said, one of the biggest things that will determine if you get divorced is how you treat each other when you disagree.
Yeah, that's pretty deep.
Because it's easy to like each other when you agree.
Yeah, I actually saw something recently that said you could actually do that before you get into a relationship, like create some kind of scenario that you know would upset that person just so you can see how they react in that situation to know whether you could be in a relationship with them.
Oh man, that might ruin a lot of relationships, but at least we wouldn't have a 52% divorce rate in the United States. So today, if you haven't been able to guess, we're talking about arguments and fights in relationships. And we really want to frame this up in teaching you guys and talking about how to have these conversations, reach compromise so that you never fight in your relationship again. How much better could your relationship be? How to ensure that you really come to each and every single disagreement with the most emotionally stable you, first of all, but with the same energy that focuses on finding a solution and a compromise that work for both people versus you trying to win and force your opinion on somebody else and trying to make it your way or the highway instead of our way, which is going to create a much better relationship in the long term where both people feel loved and seen and heard and respected. So it's going to be one hell of a conversation today. I can't wait to jump into this bad boy.
Yeah, well, like I just said, I do think that that's a pretty big thing, that seeing how someone is when they're under stress or they're upset or they've been hurt does show a lot about someone's character, and it is something that's really tricky to navigate when you're in a relationship. I know for us, this has been when we got to a low point in our relationship, and we actually went to a marriage conference. And one of the biggest things that we took away from that conference and has stayed with us through our whole marriage was this topic right here.
Yeah.
Was basically kind of how you get yourself out of this crazy cycle that you get in when you're just blaming each other, and there's blame and resentment, and you just keep going in that cycle and you can't figure out how to get out of it. And you want to get over to that thriving cycle where it's the opposite, where you are respecting each other, and in that respect you feel love, and you're in this really great cycle of lifting each other up. And that's the goal we want to get to, is getting you from that crazy cycle into that thriving cycle. That's what this episode is really about. And that is the key thing we took away and stayed with us, is when we catch ourselves getting into that crazy cycle where we start blaming. And it is how you approach your spouse. If you have a problem, if your spouse hurt you or upset you, and you go to your spouse and you immediately start to blame or say, you did this or you always do this, it's immediately going to put them on the defense, and you're going to get into an argument.
But it's so easy to blame, right? Like, man, that feels so much easier than checking your own emotions and trying to figure out what part do I own in this?
Yes. And we all get there. The only difference for us is we still do it, And it's just we get out of it faster. We've recognized how to, when we start going in that direction, we stop ourselves and we try to address it differently. We just have learned to take different approaches. And that's kind of what we want to teach you guys today is, in those moments where you get heated and you start to go down a bad path and you're saying things you shouldn't be saying, we want to we want to get to where you won't even say things that would be hurtful and that you would regret, because that's the goal. Is we don't ever want to do that. We don't want to treat our spouse that way. So we want to teach you guys to get from, if you start to feel that way, how to call a timeout, stop, and just say, we'll revisit this later so that we don't go to that place.
Yeah, because if you think about sports teams, anytime and I love sports, right? Football, they're sports that people tend to get more emotional playing. And there's times on teams, they're losing, things aren't going in their direction. There's frustration.
Oh my gosh, we saw it with our daughter's volleyball team all the time.
Oh man, there's frustration and there's anger, and all of a sudden there's a blow up between two players on the same team. And I think every single one of us can realize in that moment, they're not going to win.
As soon as you see that,
it's the second you're like, yep, they're done. Right. And then it gets plastered all over ESPN, gets played over and over again. Thank God that doesn't happen with the arguments in our relationship. We'd all be embarrassed probably. But think about that. So anytime a team stops acting like a team and it becomes about the individual and their emotions solely and not what's best for the team loses and it goes down in a spiral. But when you can really work together for the betterment of the team, and they preach this in the military, even for spouses to connect with other military spouses while you're in, because you feel part of something bigger. You feel seen, you feel heard, you can have candid conversations. And the same thing kind of goes in your marriage is you really got to act like a unified team. And it's not about one person winning. It's about the team winning, the marriage winning together. Because let's be honest, guys, and I know even Steph and I talking and prepping for this episode, sometimes you see yourself much differently than other people see you. It's just a reality where we're going to talk about fighting styles and we're going to talk about all these other things. And we're going to give you 4 tangible keys that you can take away at the end of this that you can implement immediately, things that Stephanie and I do pretty well now. We'll never master this because I think we're always working on that. But it's amazing to see when you can really work together as a team and you can get so far ahead of that fire hose of resentment that builds in relationships, just how amazing and connected you can feel as a couple. I mean, Steph and I spend more time together now than we ever have. I feel more, I can't speak for her. I feel more connected than I ever have to her and more in love with her than I've ever been. But we've done a lot of work to get to this point.
And partly I think that's because we've really weathered this storm together. We have really gone through some hard things together. And through all of that, you build such a closer bond if you can learn to lean on each other and work as a team versus being individuals and doing your own thing.
Well, in the military, we only had each other a lot. Right. That was it. So it was stare at each other and figure it out or just really hate our lives.
This is true. We really didn't have, the military took us all different places. So a lot of times we were somewhere foreign and we didn't have any family around and we're just getting to know people. So we don't have those close friends. And so we really had to learn to rely on each other. And our family really becomes it is a team unit because you do only have each other.
Well, it's crazy now because people want to air their dirty laundry all over social media and they wonder why people are judging them, or you're that friend that kind of gets in the middle and then the couple gets back together and figures it out. Now you're the asshole because you jumped in with your opinion. We all know that those things have happened. We kind of grew up in an era where there wasn't that, where you either work through your problems or some people that get divorced because of them. And they wonder why all of a sudden they don't feel connected. Why all of a sudden we just grew apart. No, you didn't grow apart. You didn't talk. You didn't treat each other with respect. You didn't figure out how to really resolve conflict together where both of you guys won, where the team won, and you really damaged your relationship. And a lot of that is really formed with what we see when we grow up and the experiences that we have prior to ever meeting each other.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the big, this is something I just want to, this is part of the awareness piece. Like, having this awareness that we come into the relationship bringing things, and
Baggage.
we've been shaped by things already when we come into the relationship. So, how we saw our parents and how we were treated by our parents and all of these
Mhm.
things do show up in our relationship, and how we like this, even for our fight style or our conflict style, like the way we approach an argument has been shaped by whatever we have been exposed to. And so I know for Walt and I, we came from a very different background. Um, we have parents that, my parents are together, but I had two parents that were actually like an opposites attract kind of thing, where they actually are different from each other. So I had one parent that was more confrontational, one that wasn't. And so the way they approached fights was a little different. And Walt had, well, he didn't really know his parents together. He was so little when they
Right.
divorced that
Hmm.
most of the time he was raised by a single parent. So, but he moved around to so many homes and different parents, and there was a lot of fighting, and
Right.
there was domestic violence and things like that. So he saw a lot of different things that I was never exposed to. And not to say that, but even just the way, like the personality of your parent, you know, if you're been raised by a single parent, you only know that one thing. And you didn't really, or you only see them with, they might have had multiple boyfriends or girlfriends, or, there's just so many, everybody's coming in with this different approach. And so when you get into a conflict, like maybe your spouse triggered you with
Hmm.
something that hurt hurt from the past, right? It didn't mean it maybe didn't even have to do with your spouse. Maybe you had something they brought up that,
Yeah, it reminded you of what your dad used to say to you.
right, is some past hurt.
Hmm.
And you get triggered in that moment and you start going off on your spouse when it wasn't even necessarily whatever was happening in that moment that was why you were so angry. And so, but your spouse might have no idea. Maybe you never communicated that to them. And so
Right. Your
they don't
spouse is
even
looking
know.
at you like, "Oh, calm down, Turbo." But I think before we get into, because I do want to spend some time talking about triggers and reactivity versus response. But Steph gave two kind of extreme examples. Right. Her parents have been married. They just hit 50. Right. Am I tripping?
50,
Years married.
53.
53 years married now.
It's your
I
53.
came from broken homes, and but it doesn't have to be like this extreme abuse scenario that I had, versus much more of a loving family. If you think about it and think about your own relationship right now too, just finances. Maybe you had a spouse whose parents spent and money was always tight because you didn't save any, and the other spouse parents were super tight and never spent anything, and you never went out to dinner. You never enjoyed it. So you got, then one spouse went the opposite way. They just want to spend some money because they've been like had handcuffs on their wallet their whole entire life, and the other spouse wants to save because they know what it was like not to have any. And raising kids, you had one parent who was really strict, and
Mhm.
now that spouse doesn't want to be strict. They kind of want to let their kids fall on their face and figure it out on their own. Meanwhile, the other person in the marriage had a parent who was helicopter parent, and because they were a helicopter parent, they don't want to be like that either. Or maybe they're exactly like their parent was. How you argue? One person grew up in a house where people yelled at each other. One person grew up in a house where they avoided conflict. So it's really taking a step back and first building some self awareness of where did you get this ability to resolve or not resolve conflict, and realizing that that did shape you and it does affect, either you went opposite or you're the same. It does affect the way that you interact with your spouse. And let's be real, Steph, that's why marriage is hard as hell, because you got two people with different experiences, different walks of
Mhm.
life, different ways that they were raised, and now they come together and they're forced to compromise or have a really shitty relationship, and they're either going to win, which is 48% of the time people are staying together, or 52% of the time people are getting divorced. And that doesn't mean the other 48% aren't miserable, right? So, or people aren't even getting married because they didn't see good marriages. And I think that we're at such a precipice of this change that needs to happen in marriages. But like you were talking about, our ability to respond versus react to triggers that will happen in your relationship, and then how you resolve the conflict that triggered that moment really will make or break your relationship. And I got to say, personally, for me, I'm way better now than I used to be, but I kind of used to be an asshole. Even if I didn't cuss or yell, my tone and the words that I used were indicative of what I saw growing up.
Well, yeah, we wanted to get into this too. So that was part of the awareness. Another piece is, you just said it, where we, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere with that. I promise.
You've only done it like twice in 34 episodes, and you figured it out the first time. I'm sure you'll come back from that.
Yeah, I totally had something right there. Oh, we also have the ability that when you know your spouse really well, you know exactly what's going to hurt them the most.
Yeah, those red hot.
Tend to pick, yes. You tend to pinpoint exactly what you know would set them off even more.
I never did that. All right, twice maybe in 24 years. Said nobody ever.
So we wanted to talk about this, where because we know that, and because we can really hurt our spouse in that way, a lot of times when we get in an argument, we want to win. That's how we feel. Like we just want to win this argument. I don't know why we want to win it or what we think is actually winning.
Or we want them to feel that suffering that we're feeling inside in the moment.
Yeah, I think it's more like we want to hurt them because we're hurt. To me, that's more what it feels like. It's either you want to win the argument because you feel like if I'm right, I win. Or like you just said, where it's, or really, I think it's more about I'm hurting, so I want you to hurt as bad as you hurt me. And that's where we get in this, like, we're going to keep doing it to each other until we feel like we got that, we accomplished that.
Well, it's like flying on the fastest elevator you ever been on in an argument. It's one person says something mean, the other person says something mean. It's this escalation is happening where steam's coming out of both people's ears and their head's about to explode off of their shoulders. And we say some vicious, or can say some vicious, mean things in those moments.
And that's the thing. And once you speak those words, you can't take them back. And they'll remember them, and it wounds them, and it wounds for a long time, a lot of the time. And so we think that we're going to be able to, all we're thinking in that moment is like how to win. But what we really do is we wound them, and then we actually make them take a step away from us. And it starts building this separation slowly but surely. You're getting further and further apart because every time you wound them, you take a step away. And so,
yeah, nobody got hurt and leaned in. That doesn't happen.
No.
Psychologically, that's not how we're built. And what'd you say before we started? You were talking about sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Yeah, that's the stupidest way. That's a lie. That's a complete lie. I think words are the most powerful, and they are what wound the deepest. And so remember that. And that's what we're going to get into, these steps of what you can do about the next time you get in an argument, how to not go down that path, how to not hurt and wound your spouse, but how to find solutions and get closer to each other. Because instead of wounding and hurting and pushing away, you say words that are encouraging and lift up and draw them in closer. And that's where we're going with this, is how to get to that place. What kind of steps do we need to take to be in that thriving cycle where your relationship takes off and you're more in love than you've ever been?
And you know what's crazy is I don't think we really, in the moment of emotion, in the moment where we're triggered, in the moment where we're reacting, we're not thinking about what the cost is of what we say. Now, we haven't said these things to each other, but we've heard people argue in front of us because they've either not resolved conflict, they've not compromised, and everybody knows you've been to a get together with friends and maybe a couple drinks get going, all of a sudden there's a couple that argues. And they say things like, I hate you. I don't even know why we're together. Why did we ever get married? I don't even love you anymore. And they don't actually mean that. They're just hurting themselves inside, but they want the other person to suffer like they are. They want to elicit an equivalent reaction from them emotionally, and they want them to feel how they feel. And man, you say words like that in your marriage, and the trust that you break, like you said, you're building a wall. You're building separation between each other. That's really hard to come back from. And you said this on a podcast that we did. I can't remember which one it was now. It's like you do 10 things right, and man, you could go straight, not even take the 10 away. You can go straight into the negative. There's a Love Bank one that we did. You go straight into the negative with one comment like that. In a moment of a heated interaction where you lost your composure because you were hurting emotionally. And man, we got to be better than that, people. We got to be better than that. I know personally, I have said things to Stephanie that I knew was going to piss her off because I wanted to make her mad because I felt mad.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. I think that's what happens is we feel hurt. And so we just want to inflict that hurt on the other person. And that becomes so, and that's where you were saying, like, I think it escalates so much that sometimes you say such hurtful things that, man, that wound will stay there for a long time. And it's very hard to close that wound if you're not careful. And some people never recover from that.
Well, it's like we're just blaming in the moment. The escalation might not start there, but it's like, you know what? I wouldn't have did that if you wouldn't have did this. I'm sorry for that, but you know what? I'm sick and tired of you doing this. And the anger.
Or you say, I only did this because you did that.
And it's almost like a boiling pot of water. If you ever put like macaroni or cheese or something in there and it starts to boil over, or top ramen or whatever, it starts to boil over. And if you don't turn the heat down, what's it do?
Boils over.
So it's all over the dang place. You can't even eat it no more. You got to throw it away. I mean, don't we do that in our arguments sometimes?
Like a volcano erupting.
Yeah. Right?
That pressure is building and then boom.
Explosion. and so how do we get away from doing that? How do we get to the point? And it's funny, we should talk about this a little bit, because Steph and I's biggest argument after 24 years, our biggest conflict is being on time or not being on time. And what's funny, I just want to caveat this because not 100%. We have some of our friends that are married and the wife is the one who's more on time than the husband. But I feel like most of the time it's the husband, not the wife, probably because it's a lot faster for us to get ready than women. And so we got to have some level of empathy there, fellas. If we had long hair and put makeup on and did all that stuff, it'd take us a minute too. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about that conflict style, first of all, where we used to really talk about it and both of us get super pissed at each other, and where we're at today with it.
Like you said, probably, I don't know, maybe even 80% of our arguments stem from this, because he is if you're 10 minutes early, you're late kind of person, because partly he was in the military, but also partly because he grew up in chaos. And so
I like
he
structure.
likes structure.
Yeah.
On the other hand, actually my father's military, and he was kind of like that too. Not so much, but like he liked to be on time. And my mother is not. And my mom always blamed it on we're Irish, and that's just they don't. That was her excuse. So I think I don't know. I grew up with that too, but it is a lot, partly to do with like I am OCD, and it takes me a long time to get ready because yes, my hair is actually, you can't tell right now, but my hair is actually very curly and frizzy, and it's very difficult to take care of. So it takes me a long time to do my hair and makeup. And
Stephanie don't even
perfectionist too.
You don't even really wear that much makeup. But also, it's now don't front, Steph. It's also because before we leave, you like the pillows to be good. You like things kind of put in their place before we leave, and so it doesn't even matter if we're running late in that moment.
This is what I mean. But it's hard to explain to someone who isn't the same as you.
Correct.
that you're like that because they just don't get it. They never will. I mean, he doesn't have.
Yeah,
He's never gonna know what it. Taking an hour to get ready. It's not fun. It's not something I want to be doing, but it's kind
I just wish some hair would grow on the back of my head now instead of just my grizzly face. And but isn't that the case? So is we're just different.
Mhm.
Not only are like because of our gender, we're kind of just built different innately, but also all of our experiences, we're just built different.
Also even that, like Walt is in general a very urgent person. Everything is urgent to him, and everything for him revolves around time. He's kind of always like efficiency of time, or what's the fastest way we can get these things. I don't know. I don't really know where such part of that too, I think, comes from the childhood stuff, but
I think part of it is just my brain. We can go to 4 stores and I'm thinking about the route that takes us all right-hand turns.
I don't know what the urgency is all the time, but I definitely don't come from that. My parents were very, even my dad, who I said likes to be on time, but he was always a person that was very much like slow down and take in the that's just how he is.
Like more methodical.
Yeah, I don't even know that. I don't know. He does not have urgency like that either. It's just very like let's slow down and take this in, and he's not in a rush. And so it's just hard. Like we said, that's kind of like those things we bring, like it shaped us, and we don't even realize like it comes from a place, like it came from our parents, or it may not even be your parents. It's just whatever you grew up around, or even just your own personality type. Like I think our personality types, like both my parents are a little more passive, so I think inevitably genetically I'm passive. So
thank God you're not passive aggressive though, because I could do passive. I just can't do passive aggressive. I don't think anybody could do that.
And Walt is more of an aggressive type of personality. And that's part of why he has a lot of success, because that's how he approaches life. He goes after the things he wants, and he does it with an urgency. And so
I like to say assertive.
So yes, our personality styles are very different. So of course, this kind of stuff it leads to this stuff. And that's why I think, like we were saying, this is why the biggest argument in our relationship revolves around this, because we don't see it the same way. Like I don't feel the sense to feel like I need to be in a rush, and he does. And so it's a constant battle with us. Like he's trying to get somewhere, and I'm like, it's fine. We're going to be fine. Like I'm taking my time. And like, so this causes like we clash all the time over this. And
well, even in the military, it says hurry up and wait. That's what they say in the military. Hurry up and wait.
Like, so I've been around so he was raised somewhat by his Aunt Diana, and I've been around her, and she's the same way. She's very urgent. Everything we got to do fast. And so I realized it did come somewhat from her. I think the military does do the same thing. They push that urgency on you. Hurry up and wait.
Well, growing up in chaos, I like structure. That's why I did really well in the military too. It's predictable when I lived with so much unpredictability. And what's crazy though is earlier in our relationship, even just a few years ago, I had to really change my level of intentionality around this, and so did Steph, because I would say we're always late. So we wouldn't even be late time to time. But I was pissed by the time she got ready because I just knew we were going to be late. And then I'm reacting.
You already had it in your mind we were late.
100%. And then I'm reacting emotionally, and I'm kind of being an asshole. And I'm saying things to her, hurry up. Like, I don't know why we always got to be late. God, you know what? This is so disrespectful that we're not on time and all these things. And then she would get pissed and slow down.
I just didn't like being rushed.
Right. But you would get triggered too, right? Because in that moment, I'm triggering you.
Yes, because you would get so worked up and upset about it, and then you would say things to me that in a rude tone or manner that then it would make me upset. Like, I don't deserve that. And, but I had to realize, like, I learned to start compromising on that and being like, okay, I will start getting ready earlier or hurry up more so that I'm not making them wait all the time. And so I had to make compromises too, to where it wasn't like he can just wait or,
Well, we had to really talk about it. And that's why Steph knows now, because I grew up in chaos. I had to do some self-reflection first and say, why am I so pissed about this all the time? that even when we are on time, now we're in the car, or when we're 2 minutes late, we're in the car. And now I'm just kind of pissed and my whole energy's off. And we were going to go have this great time, and it takes me 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get reset a little bit. And it just kind of spoils the time unnecessarily. Why? And then it was having the conversation with Steph, and we're going to start talking through some of these solutions now. But it was having the conversation with her to say, here's how I feel in those moments, not blaming it on her, how I feel, why it bothers me. And then it was us finding a solution that worked for both of us. And you know what? Sometimes we're on time now, sometimes we're late. And that's okay. Because you know what? That's life. There's going to be a lot of things that come up in life. And so if you think about it, though, you start thinking about the cost of these arguments that we have, and the need for one person to just not talk about it because they're conflict avoiding, or the need for some person to be overly assertive and they got to talk about it right now and they don't give their spouse space. We think about the cost of these arguments and the way Stephanie said it, it pulls us apart. We keep taking steps away from each other until we feel like we don't even know each other anymore, until we feel like you're not the person that I married, until we feel like this just isn't going to work out and maybe we should just call it quits. Imagine if we can get ahead of that, even if you've been married 24 years like us, because we're in a constant evolution for this. And imagine if you can be really intentional from today, listening to this, moving forward for the rest of your life, the rest of your marriage, and you can change the dynamic and never argue again. Because mentally, you're going to approach this with a much different energy than you ever have. So there's 4 things we want to talk about. I mean, Steph, what do you think? What's the first thing?
So I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but so when you get into this midst of this anger, and we said like you can feel things starting to escalate, you can feel it's going to be heated, or you can even tell sometimes like I did today, I could already sense like their mood is off and this isn't going to go anywhere good, or you just start to feel like it's that person is going to say something, or you're going to say something that you know is going to hurt them or wound them. Then someone needs to call a timeout and say,
I'm making a tea for the YouTube video that we're doing.
Yeah.
Timeout.
let's agree to step away from this right now while we're heated and come back to it. Even if you say it's tomorrow at lunch, or, tomorrow morning or something like that, where it's like, let's take a little time away and like calm ourselves down and have a chance to think about how we want to approach this. Because if you do it in the heat of the moment, it's not going to go anywhere good. You're just going to, like we said, then it turns into this, how can I hurt them? And it's not going to be about a solution. And what you want is to come with a solution or find a solution so that it's not an argument and both people win, and it's not I win or you win. It's we both win.
Well, Steph like going through all 4 at one time.
Oh,
like she said, number 1 is in the midst of anger, call a timeout. And I just want to say this too, guys, especially for the fellas. We're just built differently most of the time. Now, our spouse can say things that could really cut us deep, but even the way the fellas talk to each other, we're mean, we give each other a hard time, but that's how we build camaraderie. It's fun. That's just how guys are built. Women have a much more tender heart that can be hurt in a much different way when you talk to them. And when you're in the midst of anger, the things that you'll say that maybe if you said it to your best friend, y'all would laugh about it over a beer later, is the thing that's going to break the trust so bad that maybe you can never even rebuild that trust with your spouse again. And even if you're the person who's normally more assertive in the argument, you got to be grown enough and mature enough to say, hey, you know what? This isn't going anywhere. Let's take a break. Literally put the tea up, one of you guys, and say, let's take a time out. And then Steph went to the second one right after that, which is then make time to talk about it. And by the way, 10 p.m., when both of you guys are tired and you kind of argued, isn't the time to talk about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, they always say don't go to bed angry. And I used to have that play in my head sometimes.
Me too.
Like, there would be times where we literally were having arguments.
So like 2 a.m.
to bed.
Talking pillow talk.
We were going to bed angry or fighting about something, and it was like felt like you can't just leave it like that. But really, you do. If you can't, calm down and have a normal conversation about it, then you shouldn't. Then you just say, we'll talk about it tomorrow, or however long you need to calm down and be able to think rationally and not say something out of emotion. And
I think you should give yourself like a 24-hour maximum buffer, because you don't want to let things linger either, because then it's easy to just not talk about it.
right.
And I've seen this with a lot of people who are really aggressive in their conversation. They want to talk me. That's how I am. I want to talk about it now so we can get past it. But they don't give the person who's maybe more passive, that needs a second, or maybe has more control of their emotions at the time, an opportunity. But I've also seen people that are really aggressive say what they want to say, and then they don't want to talk about it again. But the other person doesn't get to really say what they need to say too. So they feel disrespected, and there's another step away. Don't let the frustration linger. Give it a 24-hour period, and then schedule time to talk about it, where both of you come back to the conversation ready to have it in a non-emotional state. There's still going to be emotion, but it's not like the argument state that we're in. And so first one, call a timeout. Second one, make time to talk about it. Go to the third one.
Third, we said you got to deal with the problem. Don't neglect it, which I feel like this kind of goes with number 2 too, that I can be bad about this, because this is my personality is more of the avoider, and but also I'm really good about, I'm the person that will call the timeout. I'm the person that will be like, let's not talk about this right now while we're angry, because I don't want to say things that I can't take back. And so I'm very good about that piece. But then I'll be like, I may not necessarily want to revisit it because I don't like the confrontation and I don't want to, it's uncomfortable to talk about. And so,
well, a day or two already went by. It's not even worth having the conversation now.
right. Sometimes you feel like I don't want to bring it back up because you feel like you're going to stir up the emotion again. But if you come to it with, and this is number 4. Sorry, we're going to go into number 4.
Steph on the ball today, boy. She's like, let's just package deals.
It's kind of a natural.
It is. It is totally a natural progression, though, for real. Or hopefully it becomes a natural progression for everybody after this podcast.
So the 4th one is find a solution and talk through a compromise. And so that's what we're saying. Like, so if you're able, you should be able to come back now, if you let the emotions die down a little, think of a solution that is going to work for both of you, where you both compromise a little and you both win. And so that's what we're saying is, so don't just not revisit it. If you said like, let's revisit this tomorrow, and that's in kind of, you should set a time or say, we're definitely talking about tomorrow at this time. Like if you can't until you both get off work or whatever, then that's what it is. But say, we definitely need to talk about this, because you're both going to have unresolved emotion and you still need to come to some kind of, and this is the thing, a lot of times we do just want to push it away and neglect it, and we don't want to talk about it,
or we want our way out of it.
Right.
And I think about even corporate America, as I led people in corporate America, everybody sees things that can be fixed. Well, most people only come to you with the problem. So even I would tell the managers and directors that were on my teams, they would just come with the problem. I was like, okay, well, what do you want to do about it? The problem doesn't do anything for me, except for say there's something we need to fix. Don't come talk to me about a problem unless you have a solution, or your intent is to talk through a solution so we can fix whatever the problem is and continue to move forward as a team. What's crazy is we can do that so easily at work and different places with our friends, and we struggle to do that with our spouse. But imagine the marriage that you can have and the relationship that you can have. Imagine what it would be like if both people came to all of those conversations with the intent on compromising, finding a solution that works for both. And sometimes that solution might be more skewed to one person or the other because they just feel strongly about it, but it's not 100%. It's just about finding a solution that works for the team McKinley in this case, right? Finding a solution that works for the team and offering that solution up without blaming the other person. And think about it. So, ladies, if your husband's been working hard, it's 116 in Arizona, he's coming home from work, he's tired, but he's not really engaging with the family. It's not okay to not engage with the family. But if you say, You're not engaging with the family. We don't even feel like you're here. All you do is go to work and come home, and then you just expect this and that. Where do you think the conversation is going to go? Probably bad. But imagine
He's going to feel attacked.
if you can, instead of blaming, influence, and you can say, hey, we really miss you. I know you've been working really hard. I see you coming home. I know you're tired. I want to give you some time to decompress, but I need to have some conversations with you. I love you. Like, the kids would love to just play catch with you out in the yard. How can we make something like that work? We all just miss you and we love you so much. We're just happy when you get home. Man, that guy's going to think to himself, damn, you're right. You know what? I love you guys too. And he's going to then take a step towards you because he doesn't feel disrespected. And what are you going to do? You're going to take a step towards him too. And when you can have loving conversations to not manipulate, but influence because of the way that you're framing up the needs and wants and the reasons behind it, it takes vulnerability to do this. And really letting them know how you feel fully without blame and providing a solution and why the magic of that solution would be so great for your relationship or whatever that is.
Like, just see how differently that was said. Ultimately, you're kind of saying the same thing, but two totally different ways. I mean, one is blaming and being kind of rude, and the other one is helpful and, actually trying to lift up.
Yeah.
And it's such a different approach that it's true. And think about yourself and how you like, if someone comes to you in that way, in that manner,
Yeah.
if they come to you blaming and pointing the finger, you get defensive. If they come to you saying, hey, I really miss you and I'd really love to spend some time with you, and you approach it in that way, how could you not be like, oh wow, like, that makes me feel loved, that makes me want to spend time with them, versus the opposite where you're kind of like, I don't even want to be around you if you're going to talk to me like that.
Right. F you. Because that's how people feel, even if they don't say it out loud, when they feel attacked. Don't ever attack. Provide a solution. Be willing to compromise. And your relationship will go on a whole nother level. And it will never regress if you stay intentional about these 4 things. So call a timeout. Schedule time to talk about. I mean, literally schedule it. Have the conversation. Do not neglect, especially if you're the avoider. And then find a solution. Offer a solution. Find a compromise that really works for both people, where everybody feels like they win. The team won.
Yeah, and I just want to point out one other little thing that just came to my mind is, sometimes, your spouse will say something that, or you see them get ramped up, but it feels out of character for you. So you're like, I'm going to let it slide this time. Like, I'm not even really going to say anything because
I'm going to forgive
I
him
can
for that.
tell that, yeah, he had a bad day or she had a bad day. And so I'll let that one go. But then if you keep doing that, that's where we get to this point where it's like, okay, but if you keep letting that affect, because they may have said something hurtful or they may have had a really rude tone or whatever it was, and that starts to build up over time, and you don't have this conversation, you don't take this time out on one of these and say, hey, I just really need to talk to you about this because this is bothering me. I'm just feeling kind of hurt. And you let them know how you feel and you address the situation, and they have a chance to, and then they're more aware, and then they can make changes. Where if you never say anything, but every time, that's like a mark that's, it's a little cut in your heart. Every time there's a little cut and a little cut and a little cut. And before you know it, your heart is just in pieces and there's no coming back from it. Now that person doesn't even have a chance. And that's where the person's like, I'm done. It's over.
Yeah, there's nothing they
Can't
can do
come
to
back.
fix this.
Yeah. They can't come back from this. And you don't want to get to that point. And that's why we're saying, like, really do these 4 things. This is why the avoiding piece is really big. This is something I personally work on because I have a tendency to do this where, because I don't like conflict and because I don't like to hurt people and I just have an issue with that, I will just not say anything. But really, it was leaving a cut every time. to a point where then I get to where it's so bad that, and they don't even understand where I'm coming from at that point. Then it's like, if I bring it up, it's like, well, why didn't you say something then? And they're confused.
You're bringing up something from 9 months ago. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And then they're confused. Like, what? Like, they won't even remember. That's the other problem, is if you don't address it quickly, then they don't even remember they did it. And you won't remember every little thing either, but you do remember how it made you feel. But they're not going to understand that because you never talked about it to them. And so this is why I'm really stressing, and this is where like Wall and I are different about this. Like, he'll address it right away. That is a positive in some ways. It's just, you don't want to do it in the heat of the moment.
Right.
So for both personality types, I think you can see what we're saying is like, he may not be the one that's good at calling the timeout. I'm better at that. But then he's better at addressing the situation and talking about it when it happens. I'm not as good about that. And so I hope you recognize yourself in one of us, because I think everybody has a tendency to kind of do one or the other. And so both have a positive and a negative about that. We both have things we can work on when it comes to that. So really those 4 steps, like.
Well, and that's why we make a good team,
Right.
right? We have different strengths, and that's what's beautiful about a marriage, when you can compromise and find the spot in the middle. Guys, this is the game changer your relationship needs. As always, listen to this podcast with your partner. If you haven't done it at all, this is the one. Listen to this one with your partner. Allow us the opportunity to open up the conversation. We have lived this journey together. People desperately need this in their relationship. And look, while you're at it, join the Legacy Driven Marriages community on Instagram and Facebook at Legacy Driven Marriages. Get around and stay involved with other couples fighting for their relationships too. It's so critical versus the external influences and pressures we get on our relationships, to make sure you stay with people that are in that arena. But look, guys, this has been a fun topic today. I had a blast talking about this one. And
this is an important one. You guys, like I said, this is the one I feel like stayed with us the most in our marriage, and it has really helped us stay in a good place. We have been able to stay more in a thriving cycle. We don't go in the crazy cycle hardly ever anymore, because we recognize it so much faster. And that's the point we hope you get to, is it's not that you're never going to argue again. It's just get out of it faster.
Yeah, game changer, y'all. This is the reason we're still married today. Without it, I don't think we would have made it. Right. This specific topic right here. So look, guys, until the next time, keep fighting for your marriage.
Keep loving each other and keep elevating your legacy.
See you next Tuesday.